Good evening. Call to order this June 5th meeting of the Winston-Salem City Council and ask the City Secretary to call the roll, please.
Present.
Here.
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 Present.
Thank you very much. Would you please join the City Council and me in a moment of silence? Thank you. Would you join the City Council and me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our Sergeant at Arms tonight is Lieutenant Chris DeLong. Lieutenant, thank you for being with us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, you see some other folks up here with us tonight. What we're starting tonight is the first time we're using electronic voting tonight. You also see who makes the motion and who's asked to speak and things of that nature. So it's our first time of doing it, so it's going to take a little bit of getting used to, so bear with us a little bit if it seems to be running a little bit rough, but in the long run I think it's going to be great for us. Citizens are able to see a little more clearly and definitively what we're doing up here. Tonight's agenda of the City Council is comprised of the following items. We have 4 rezoning petitions, 2 UDO text amendments. There's an item regarding the issuance of proposed bonds. There's an item regarding the eligibility of property for the National Register of Historic Places, and there are 2 items making recommendations for boards and commissions. The rezoning petitions and the UDO text amendments and the issuance of bonds are listed as public hearings, and when these public hearings are called, persons in the council chamber will be given an opportunity to speak, and if there's opposition to the zoning petitions, the proponents and the opponents each will be given 15 minutes for presentation and then 3 minutes for rebuttal. If no one wishes to speak, I'll close the public hearing and the City Council will consider the item. We're televising this meeting live tonight on TV 13, and it will be replayed tomorrow at 9 a.m. and again Wednesday at 9 p.m. Of course, copies of our agenda as well as videos of our previous meetings are always available online at the city's website, www.cityofws.org, and just simply click on the Watch Meetings Online option. So, may we have the first item, please?
Item Z1, public hearing on zoning petition of Linda Frazier from LO to LBL, property located on the west side of Renolda Road, south of Yadkinville Road, located in the Northwest Ward. Planning Board recommended approval of the petition.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the council chamber who wishes to be heard on this proposed rezoning? Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed, and I'd recognize Councilmember Larson, Councilmember McIntosh, beg your pardon. Do you want a presentation on it, Councilmember McIntosh?
I'm just trying to get back to where I request to speak. Yes. Please, Mr. Norby, could you give us a rundown on the
Mr. Norby.
application, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council members. You see on the map here the property shown in yellow on the west side of Renolda Road. Down at the bottom of that kind of wedge looking of office and commercial zoning, and this is a proposal from the existing LO zone to limited business, limited use there. Mostly surrounded by RS9 except for that wedge of business zoning along Renolda Road. Here are some photos. Up in the upper left is the subject property, and looking north and south on Renolda Road, you can see that in either direction there on the other side of the picture there. This request is consistent with both the recommendations of Legacy and the West Suburban Area Plan, and LBL zoning is consistent with the zoning pattern along this part of Renolda Road. So this went forward on May 11th to the Planning Board for public hearing. There was no opposition. The Planning Board recommended approval.
Any questions for Mr. Norby? Councilmember McIntosh? And I will say that our council members will be making a motion electronically, but we've asked them to also make the motion verbally as well so we can follow up.
I move for approval of 1, the First, statement of consistency as set forth on the agenda, and 2, W-3328.
Second.
That's motion's been moved by Councilor McIntosh and seconded by Councilor Taylor. In discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. And if you're opposed, vote no. And the survey says that's unanimous. So thank you, Councilor McIntosh. We're going to go to item Z2.
Item Z2, public hearing on zoning petition of Philip and Brenda Fischel and consideration of 4 findings of fact for a special use permit for a transmission tower in an RS9 zoning district, property located on the south side of Jasper Lane, east of Old Salisbury Road, located in the South Ward. Planning Board determined that the site plan meets the requirements of the Unified Development Ordinances.
This is a public hearing, and in this particular case, the City Council and I are acting in our quasi-judicial capacity. The process for issuing a special use permit is following this quasi-judicial effort there. Speakers must present testimony and evidence under oath. Speakers should rely only on their own information and not base their remarks on what someone else has said or knows. The applicant and other witnesses have the right to ask questions of each other. And all testimony and evidence must relate to the 4 findings of fact that the council must make. All testimony and evidence must relate to the special use permit requested and not alternative tower types or general concerns regarding the cell tower ordinance. As it relates to transmission towers, state and federal law do not allow the council to consider the following: the requirements relating to or the environmental effects of radio frequency emissions as long as the facilities comply with the FCC regulations. Secondly, information that concerns the specific need for the wireless support structure, including if the service to be provided from the wireless support structure is to add additional wireless coverage or additional wireless capacity. Third, the business decisions about the design service, customer demand for service, or the quality of service to or from a particular site. And 4, the opinion testimony from non-expert witnesses, in particular, testimony as to how the proposed use would impact the value of neighboring properties. Additionally, the council must only consider evidence provided at the hearing. Communications with members of the City Council outside of the hearing are prohibited and must be disclosed if any. So I would just say if there are any council members had any discussions offline, please disclose those at this time. Okay. So the 4 findings of fact are or will be shown on the screen in a little bit. And the process also requires the City Council to issue a special use permit only when it is able to make an affirmative finding as to each of the 4 findings. The applicant has the burden of proof as to the 2nd and 3rd finding, and the opposition has the burden of proof with respect to the 1st and 4th finding. Because this is a quasi-judicial proceeding which requires all testimony to be provided under oath, citizens may not stand or raise their hands in support of, for, or opposition to the requested special use permit. So what I'd like to ask at this time, if anyone plans to speak on this, including the staff, if you would come forward and get sworn in at this time. Thank you. This is a public hearing. No one has signed up to be heard on it. Does there anyone want to make a comment? Please, if you come forward and state your name and address for the record, please.
Mayor, if I may,
Yes.
do you think it might be better for staff to go ahead and do the presentation first? And then
If you would just hold on and let me ask Mr. Norby to give us a brief staff presentation on it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You see on the screen here the 4 elected body findings. That's what the council would need to make positive findings on all 4 of those. This is a aerial photo of the property in question. You can see it's a pretty sparsely developed area in the immediate vicinity, and then there's more residential development around it. But it's a very scattered development in and around this site here. This is part of the subject property, and the proposed tower would be located right behind the building in the foreground there. This is the site plan that would show where the tower is going to be located. It's a 125-foot tower that is flagpole style, so it's a concealed tower. Doesn't have any of the equipment on the outside of it, but it would be placed right behind that building. You see the center of the circle there. along the back behind the road. The petitioner was required to show simulations of the height, so they actually flew a balloon over the site where the tower would be to give you an idea of the approximate height of it, and so those are the balloon simulations that show it at that height that was proposed. And these are different perspectives, so you can see the blue arrow pointing to it along some of the neighboring streets and roads there. This is looking back from Old Salisbury Road into the property there, and then this is from some nearby residential properties that would show the height of the tower there. The planning board reviewed the site plan and certifies that the site plan meets UDO requirements. As you know, we recently made a text amendment that the planning board does not make you a recommendation on the findings. That's your province to do that. And so what's before you is the making the 4 findings based on the testimony that's presented before you. And these, again, are the findings, and that is the staff presentation.
All right. Any questions, Mr. Norby, this time? Thank you, Mr. Norby. Now we'll have the public hearing, if you'll come forward, please, and we'll give 15 minutes to proponents as well as opponents, if there are any.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Laura Good. I'm with Baker Donaldson, and we represent Verizon Wireless in their application for a special use permit for the proposed facility. At this time, I would like to enter into the record the application as filed with exhibits 1 through 16. I'm sorry, 1 through 19. And the application as filed with exhibits 1 through 19 go through the transmission tower standards in the Winston-Salem zoning ordinance and go point by point through how each of those requirements will be met and refers to each evidentiary item that supports those statements. And I would be happy to answer any questions you may have about those. However, I was going to go straight to the findings of fact, unless y'all have questions about the specific tower standards. Okay.
Any questions? Go ahead.
All right, so the first finding of fact for the City Council is that the use not materially endanger the public health or safety if located where proposed and developed according to the application and plan as submitted and approved. The proposed tower will comply with all federal, state, and local regulations, including the Winston-Salem regulations. Specifically, it will be subject to and in compliance with federal aviation requirements as well as the FCC federal communications requirements. That is evidenced by an airspace study that was submitted as Exhibit 10 of the application that showed that we meet the requirements of the FAA. Additionally, in terms of safety, the facility will be fenced and secured with an 8-foot locked gate to prevent any access by unauthorized personnel. The second finding of fact is that the use will meet all required conditions and specifications, and again, the application as filed with exhibits 1 through 19 show how each of the required ordinance standards for transmission towers will be met. The third finding of fact is that the use will not substantially injure the value of adjoining or abutting property, or that the use is a public necessity. To evidence that the use will not materially or substantially injure the value of adjoining or abutting property, Verizon has submitted as Exhibit 16 of the binder the real estate impact study that was prepared by David Smith, who is a real estate appraiser. He is here tonight to provide his testimony regarding the report that he provided to you and to give his expert testimony as to no substantial injury to property values, and can answer any questions you may have about his report and his findings. Additionally, the use is a public necessity as it will help to aid in response to emergency calls in the area. Specifically, more and more homeowners are relying almost solely on wireless service for their form of communication. Approximately 50% of American households today are wireless-only households, and that number is only expected to increase. So especially in emergency situations, it has become vital that there is wireless service in an area so that people can place those 911 calls, but also so that emergency responders can respond to those calls. Emergency responders such as EMS and police do have mobile data transmitters in their vehicles that allow them to have access to information they wouldn't be able to get over the radio. For example, criminal records, arrest warrants that may be out for police when they're making stops and making on-the-spot decisions, but also with EMS being able to transmit real-time information to hospitals as they're transporting patients so that they get the fastest and most up-to-date information to adequately treat those people as they're in transit. And wireless service helps to aid all of that. And finally, the fourth finding of fact is that the location and character of the use, if developed according to the application and plan submitted and approved, will be in harmony with the area in which it is to be located and in general conformity with the legacy. The subject property and all adjacent properties and most properties in the general vicinity are all zoned RS9, which is the same zoning classification of the subject property. Again, because towers are located, are permitted as a special use in the RS9 district, this shows that all the adjacent properties and most of them in the surrounding area would allow this tower as a special use permit, and that is prima facie evidence that this is in harmony with the area. Additionally, the design of the facility will ensure that it is in harmony with the area. It will be concealed. All of the equipment and antennas will be concealed into a flagpole type structure. It's not going to it's not going to fly a flag, but that's the best description of what it's going to look like. It's going to be painted white, and it will be designed to blend in with the existing white painted structures on the property. Additionally, we will install landscaping, and there is natural vegetation on the property and surrounding properties to provide additional screening. It will be an innocuous use. No noise, light, odor, dust, or vibration will be caused. No increase in traffic is expected, as this will be an unmanned facility with only periodic maintenance. And at this time, I will just answer any questions you may have about the application.
Any questions with the application? And I would remind the council we cannot consider some of the comments you made regarding the need for service, so we would have to disregard those things. Do you want Mr. Smith to, for the record, make comments regarding the values?
Yes, please.
All right. Oh, excuse me, Councilman Bessie.
I just had one clarifying question. So,
Sure.
as you described the structure, it sounded like a unipole.
Yes,
All right,
that
thank
is
you.
correct.
Thank you, Mr. President. Councilmember Larson.
And for clarity, I understand this is not an illuminated pole. There's no lights on this one.
Correct. At 125 feet, we're not required to have any lighting.
Right. Councilmember McIntosh.
And I'm not sure if this is for you or for staff, but you handed out your application, which is 19 sections. Is there a requirement? I mean, we don't really have an opportunity. We really can't go through a 19-section application sitting here, all of us. Is there a requirement to have that turned in early? I mean, it just strikes me as it doesn't do us a lot of good to get that at this late date.
Okay.
Ms. Carmen.
Thank you. If you feel like you need additional time to consider those items, you certainly can continue the hearing to another time. But it would be helpful if they plan on submitting a book of that size to provide it in advance.
My assumption is that staff has seen it.
They
And
did
that
submit
we're getting
it,
a summary.
and what we tried to provide in your booklets was what we thought were the most relevant things, like the photo simulations and the documentation from the consultant and all that. So.
Right. Okay. My point was it's really not very purposeful to have that book given to us at this point. We're relying on the staff to summarize. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Larson.
As a matter of clarity, and in mind, this is, I think, to our attorney as well, in a quasi-judicial role, our access to this information, if it were provided earlier to us, would that information have to be provided as public record for anybody that was opposing this matter?
It would be provided at the point the items are going to be entered into the agenda system so that anybody could actually access that information.
Right.
So there'd probably be a lot of information to try to download into the system. So in actuality, you may not end up getting it until the night of the meeting. But
Well, I would agree with Councilman McIntosh that it's a very comprehensive report. Congratulations and thank you for that. But it is difficult, particularly with the consensus sort of broken down summary that we get, to really comprehend, one, the amount of work that went into it, and when we're supposed to evaluate 4 very specific considerations, which you went through very quickly, any concerns of those is really hard for us to judge. My impression is that we're in compliance, but I do feel a little uncomfortable not having an opportunity to fully evaluate your points on the 4 things that we're supposed to evaluate on.
All right, let's continue with the public hearing. Mr. Smith, if you'd state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is David Smith. I live in 3 Morristown Circle in Durham, North Carolina. I'm a state-certified general real estate appraiser, and I'm also a member of the Appraisal Institute, which is the most highly regarded professional appraisal organization. I did go out and look at the property to come up with to see if it has an adverse effect. I found another property in Forsyth County near Walkertown that has a 185-foot lattice tower, and it's right adjacent to 8 properties. I looked at the per square foot value of those properties after making adjustments, and then I found another neighborhood about 6 miles away that had similar sized houses, similar in all respects, and the per square foot values of those properties were roughly the same as those of right adjacent to the tower or with the tower view. Based on that, it is my opinion that this tower would have no adverse effect on the property values. And I went through that quickly, but I'll be glad to go into any kind of
Any
detail
questions, Mr. Smith?
that you'd like.
Councilmember Montgomery.
Yes. How many of these type of evaluations have you done?
I've probably done about 20 to 30.
And in that 20 to 30 evaluations, how many have you actually found to adversely impact properties?
None.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Is there anyone else for the proponents that would like to be heard? All right. Seeing no one, is there anyone in opposition to this rezoning? All right. Seeing no one, we've had the presentation from the Planning Board Director, and I will now close the public hearing and would recognize Councilmember Larson. Excuse me.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that, 1, the City Council affirm the 4 findings as required in Section 6-1.5F of the Unified Development Ordinance and detailed on the first page of the ordinance in this agenda packet. And 2, City Council approve the site plan that is included with this special use permit request, along with the conditions included in the special use permit staff report. And 3, the City Council issue a special use permit to Philip and Brenda Fischel for the transmission tower in the RS-9 zoning district based on staff report, testimony, evidence that the petition meets the requirements of the UDO.
All right. You want to hit your motion button, too?
I can't get, mine doesn't come up.
I'll push it.
All right. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Councilmember McIntosh, seconds. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes, and any opposed indicate by voting no. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Item 3, please.
Item Z3, public hearing on zoning petition of Michael Trollinger, Albert Brown, and Isaiah Davis from RS9 to LBL. Property located on the northwest corner of Carver School Road and Lansing Drive, containing approximately 1.46 acres, located in the northeast ward. Planning Board recommended approval of the petition.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the council chamber who wishes to be heard on this proposed rezoning? Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Burke, do you want a presentation?
Yes,
Okay.
Mr. Norby.
Ms. Norby, brief presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You see the property here, kind of a triangular-shaped property right there at the northwest corner of Carver School Road and Lansing Drive. And it is surrounded to the north and by RS9 property, and then further to the east, some RS7, RM8S, and then to the south, the Maisie Woodruff Center and the church property that is owned IP. Aerial photo shows the actual site there is quite wooded right now. And you see at Carver School Road kind of bends around and forms that curve for the eastern boundary there. These are some ground shots. This is from the entrance to the Maisie Woodruff Center looking into the site across Lansing Drive. This is a house that's on the immediately on the west boundary of the property in question. So the property in question is just to the right of that house. And then this is looking back toward the Maisie Woodruff Center and the care that was taken with the building architecture, building materials there. And then this is looking across the corner to the east side of Carver School Road where the Carver Road Church of Christ is located. And then this is looking up Carver School Road around, and the property is to the left, so this is the curve that is going around there. The currently adopted Northeast Suburban Area Plan, and just as a reminder, you've got a new update that will be coming to you from the Planning Board, but this is the currently adopted one, shows that in an area of recommended low-density residential use. So the site is located at the intersection of two minor thoroughfares. The request could accommodate a commercial use that provides food and groceries to the area, which a lot of people have stated is a need in that area. And the proposal is not consistent with the low-density residential land use recommendations of the existing Northeast Suburban Area Plan. But Legacy 2030 promotes quality design of sites and buildings, and the petitioner has agreed since the Planning Board meeting with the council members' request to add a condition requiring exterior building materials for whatever is built on the site to be consistent with those used for the adjacent Maisie Woodruff Center and the Carver Road Church of Christ. So with that, on May 11th, that went to the City County Planning Board for public hearing. There was no opposition. The Planning Board recommended approval after the petitioner deleted part of his original request that would include the use as car wash and convenience store. He deleted that, and the Planning Board recommended approval.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Norby? Thank you, Mr. Norby. Recognize Councilmember Burke for a motion if she is ready.
Yes. Mayor and members of the council, I move for the approval of 1, the statement of consistency as set forth on the agenda, and 2, W-3329 with revised conditions.
Second.
Motion second. Councilmember Burke makes a motion. Councilmember Montgomery seconds the motion. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. And anybody opposed, indicate by voting no.
Here we come.
All right, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Councilmember Burke. Item number 4, please.
Item Z4, public hearing on zoning petition of Stephen Craver, trustee for the Trust of Zulave Craver, from RS9 to GBS, property located on the southwest corner of Clemensville Road and Con Oak Drive, located in the southeast ward. Planning Board recommended approval of petition and approval of the site plan with staff recommendations.
We'll recognize Councilmember Taylor, who I believe wishes to perhaps continue this item. Councilmember Taylor.
Mayor, members of the council, I move to continue item Z4 until the August 7th, 2017 meeting.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Not all in favor of the motion to continue this item, please indicate by voting yes. Any opposed to continuance, please indicate by voting no.
Mr. Mayor, I just note that
Councilmember Bessie.
the motion indicates approve. I assume we'll need to have more notes in our minutes.
Okay, go back and amend that motion.
Right, it's clear that the motion is to continue, not the motion to approve the item.
So we can go ahead and vote?
We can vote, yes.
No.
No.
Okay, 1 second. Go ahead. I didn't vote?
You weren't fast enough. Taylor puts a wrinkle in the whole system.
Continue. There we go. No, start voting. Okay. No, we just need to get everybody's votes again.
All right. Now we have I think the proper motion. Thank you, Councilmember Bessie, the attorney on the thing. So, all in favor of the motion to continue this item, please indicate by voting yes. Anybody opposed, indicate by voting no. All right, very good. The motion passes to continue this item to August 7th. Thank you very much. Item number 5.
Item Z5, public hearing on ordinance amending proposed by Planning and Development Services amending Chapter B of the Unified Development Ordinances to amend standards for the Winston-Salem Overlay Zoning District, recommended by the Community Development, Housing, and General Government Committee.
Before we have the public hearing, Kirk Erickson is going to give us a brief summary of what we're proposing to do here, unless Mr. Norby wants to make an introductory comment.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Just a brief presentation on this item. The petitioner for this item is Planning and Development Services staff. The request would revise the UDO to amend the Winston Overlay District standards, and I want to point out that this proposed amendment was discussed at the Community Development, Housing, and General Government Committee on May 9th. There was a lot of public input that was received when we were working on this proposed amendment. This went through significant involvement with the Downtown Winston-Salem Partnership. We had meetings at the Downtown Partnerships Planning Committee, at the Partnerships Executive Committee, and it was also heard by the full board of directors of that organization. Following those meetings, staff held a drop-in meeting in the Stewart Building that was attended by realtors, parking operators, downtown residents, the Piedmont Triad Apartment Association, and a couple of city council members as well. During all of this discourse, stakeholders expressed general support for the changes that we're going to present. Just to give you a brief summary of the current overlay district standards, this council adopted them in 2010 to promote new development and redevelopment in the downtown core that was compatible with our existing urban, pedestrian-friendly character. The current overlay standards require 4 basic things. The first is a 0-foot front setback for new buildings, or in other words, buildings located next to the sidewalk line. The second is that parking be located to the rear of buildings. Third, 1 door per 100 feet of street frontage, and that's to ensure that pedestrians have the opportunity to interact with the interior of the building. And finally, a minimum 50% transparency requirement, either in the form of windows and doors, so that folks on the sidewalk can see what's going on in the buildings and vice versa. An alternative compliance provision does exist in this ordinance for unique situations where the proposal can't meet the letter of the law but can meet the intent of it. And the approval for that provision is by the planning board. This is the boundaries of the overlay district. As you can see, it's basically the central business district, kind of the area that's bounded in the center by Trade Street going north and south, and 4th Street going east and west. As far as the proposed revisions, staff is proposing 5 things. The first would be requiring ground floor residential units to be raised at least 3 feet above the street level. That allows these units to have a sense of separation and privacy so that you can have units close to the street and still maintain pedestrian friendliness and privacy at the same time. The second is establishing basic parking structure design standards to avoid long stretches of dead space along the street. The third would be requiring 25% facade transparency for upper levels of street-facing facades. This would be in addition to the 50% ground floor transparency requirement currently in the ordinance, but this requirement is reduced as it allows more flexibility for locating bathrooms, closets, and other things that you would probably need in upper floors of buildings. The fourth item is prohibiting over-street walkways above several key streets downtown. Again, there's only a couple of these in the downtown core currently, and we're not aware of any plans for these affected streets to have new ones, but these are features that have been shown to reduce the pedestrian orientation of the street. Finally, this ordinance would revise rules for certain signage types in the district. Specifically, it would allow flashing neon signs and prohibit electronic message boards except on stadiums, coliseums, and exhibition buildings. And the district boundaries would remain the same as on the slide that I showed you a couple slides ago. This did go to the City County Planning Board on April 13th. A public hearing was held and there was no opposition. The Planning Board did recommend approval at that time. And again, the General Government Committee was briefed on this item in May. I'll be glad to answer any questions at this time.
Any questions, Mr. Erickson? Councilmember Montgomery.
2 questions. One, in reference to electronic message boards, do we have a board that will be replacing at Benton Convention Center? And if so, does this impact that?
If a board, I'm not aware, Councilmember Montgomery, one way or the other, but that would be one of the uses that would be allowed to have an electronic message board.
Right.
Also things like the Millennium Center or the Stevens Center, all those assembly type uses, coliseums, stadiums, and exhibition buildings would be allowed to have them.
And then the second question is in reference to the residential ground floor unit being raised 3 feet above. Does that account specifically for the actual level of the floor or actual windows into the actual unit itself?
It's the finished floor elevation, and if I may, I can show you a slide with some examples of what this refers to. The images on the right side and the center of the slide show what we would like to see in terms of a desired urban form. The classic buildings that you see in the Northeast or East Coast cities like Philadelphia, D.C., New York City, Brooklyn, etc., they all have some elevation so that you can have some privacy if you live close to the sidewalk. The image on the right is a new building in downtown Charlotte that picks up on this form, and the image on the left shows what happens when you don't have that raised elevation. Everything that you might have on your deck is out there at the public level, and if you were to have the blinds open, you notice the blinds are closed in that image for the ground floor, but if they were to be open, any passerby on the sidewalk would be able to see what's going on in the unit. So we're just trying to ensure a little bit of privacy for those residents.
This is a typical thing that is required in some of our peer cities as well.
Right. Then the only reason I asked the questions I was asked in terms of some of the development community question in terms of brand new construction and then adaptive reuse of existing buildings, particularly if we take the Reynolds building, for instance, which has ground floor residents in it. If you're walking down the sidewalk, but they have raised windows, but that ground floor is actually below street level in terms of how that rests.
That would actually meet the ordinance standards as well, because there's the other residences would be above the ground level. Okay. Also pointing out that there's a provision that most redevelopment or adaptive reuse doesn't trigger this code. This is mainly for new construction.
All right, Councilmember McIntosh asked to be heard.
And that question just answered what I was going to ask, but this wouldn't preclude doing a basement unit?
Correct.
That you see so often in these kind of developments?
Exactly.
Okay, good.
Councilman Clark?
You just half answered mine. My daughter happens to own what they refer to as a garden apartment, which is the basement. It's a half basement. Would you be allowed to put residential there since it would not be 3 feet off the...
You would be allowed because the main unit would be 3 feet above. As long as that what we would consider the ground level unit was 3 feet above, then you could do that garden unit.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
All right. Any additional questions, Councilwoman Bessie?
Yeah, with regard to the prohibited signs provision D4, the additional language permitting on-premises attached neon signage with blinking, chasing, flashing, or moving effects. Are there any limitations within the Winston Overlay District about where such signage can be placed?
If you'll allow me to just catch up, see where we are in the ordinance here. There would be no specific provisions for the overlay district. They would have to follow the same wall signage standards as signs throughout the city, which is basically 15% of the wall is your maximum cap in terms of what you can use as signage.
The on-premises attached neon signage, does that indicate that it has to be flat against the front of the building, or can it extend?
It can also be projecting. In anticipation of this question, I did print out the projecting sign requirements. If it's a 1 or 2 story building, those projecting signs shall be 24 square feet. And if it's a 3 story or more building, you can have a projecting sign that's 56 square feet. You can only have 1 projecting sign per building, and the projecting sign shall not extend more than 5 feet from the building wall that it's attached to. And they would also have to have an encroachment agreement from the city.
Is there any limitation on the height of the projecting sign?
There is.
Where on the building?
It would not be permitted to have the top of the projecting sign located higher than the 3rd story or 42 feet.
42 feet. All right, thank you.
Kirk has some, if you're interested, he has a slide with some pictures of those kinds of signs.
Might be helpful.
So these are the types of signs we're talking about. Again, that Nashville Crossroads sign is probably larger in terms of the square footage than what I was reading you earlier, and it probably projects farther than 5 feet. That's probably more along the lines of 6 or 7 feet. It's hard to completely tell from this image, but this is the type of thing that the Downtown Partnership and other downtown advocates have been asking staff for several years, is the ability to do this more traditional, typically urban type of signage.
Good, thank you. All right, thank you, Mr. Jackson. We do have a public hearing, and Mr. Jason Thiel, President of Downtown Partnership, I'll invite him to come forward. Thiel, if you give your name and address for the record, please.
Jason Thiel, 305 West 4th Street, Winston-Salem, North Carolina 27101. I'm the president of the Downtown Winston-Salem Partnership. First, I want to thank Kirk for doing such a nice presentation. Second, had a historical photo of the Carolina Theater. Had a beautiful projecting neon sign from, I don't know what year it was, but it was probably 1945, maybe 1950 if I had to guess. And I don't know why we ever got rid of the projecting neon signs in our downtown, but it's taken us a little while to get to first projecting signs, which we got a couple of years ago. And you see them becoming more prevalent downtown. They're clearly an urban type of signage, and just saw one being installed on sweet potatoes on Trade Street today. So thank you for your consideration and your thoughtful questions. Our downtown organization fully supports this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thiel.
Yeah,
All right, Councilmember Burke, you have a question of?
I'm just going to make a comment.
Okay.
Mr.
Mr. Thiel?
Thiel. We spent, I don't know how many hours with science, so go back and review some of those minutes and just read some of those comments.
Thank you.
I think it's good.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Thiel. All right, is anyone else would like to be heard during this public hearing time for this item? All right, seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Montgomery, this did come through your committee. If you are prepared to make a motion, I would certainly entertain that.
Yes. I move for approval of 1, the statement of consistency as set forth on the agenda, and 2, the UDO text amendment 275.
Second.
Councilmember Clark seconds that he has the quickest finger on that. Councilmember Bessie is recognized.
Thanks. Yeah, the only thing that surprises me is that there are no limits on where the flashing or moving neon signs can be located. I can imagine one being placed just precisely in the undesired location of up on the 3rd story across from one of the residential towers downtown, and I know we would get complaints about that. But that's that's the only surprise I have with regard to the restrictions in this ordinance.
Very good. Councilmember McIntosh.
And I want to speak to that. If we can come back and alter this if that does become a problem. I mean, I could see situations where that might be an issue as well, but I think the possibility of it is pretty.
We do have to issue an encroachment permit, so we have some control.
Yeah. I want to thank staff, and I want to thank the partnership and Jason for all the work that went into this. This is sort of an extension of the Winston Overlay District that was done a while back, the form-based standard. And as Jason said, this has taken a while, but I think it's worth the time and effort that went into it to get the amount of public input that went into this. And I think overwhelmingly, people had lots of questions, but overwhelmingly after working their way through it, it was very well supported by everybody that attended these. So very good job on the staff's part. Thank you.
All right. Well, all in favor of this motion, please indicate by voting yes, and anybody opposed indicate by voting no. And that motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Item number 6.
Item Z6, public hearing on an ordinance amendment proposed by Planning and Development Services, revising Chapter B of the Unified Development Ordinances to require neighborhood meetings, neighborhood outreach for certain zoning cases, recommended by the Planning Board.
Mr. Norby, would you please give us a brief presentation on this action, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As council knows, we have talked about neighborhood notification for several years and have done several things to try to improve notifications, including signs and increased radius where we send the notification letters out. But one of the things that continues to come to the planning board as well as to the council is sort of the inconsistency in terms of how petitioners handle outreach to citizens as these zoning cases are coming forward. So before we even got started on this, we came to the planning board, talked about what were some options to strengthen the requirement to do some petitioner-based outreach. And this idea then was brought to the General Government Committee on March 21st, and General Government Committee gave us the blessings to actually propose this text amendment that you're seeing tonight. Under our current system, as you know, staff we strongly encourage petitioners to conduct neighborhood outreach prior to the planning board meeting and to contact the council member about the meeting. So the council member can elect to attend if they wish. Some of the issues with our current system is that despite encouragement by staff, not all petitioners heed this advice. A number do, but a number don't. Outreach, when it does happens, also sometimes happens too close to the planning board meeting, or sometimes even after the planning board meeting, between the planning board and the council. And that's sort of unfair to the planning board, because the planning board doesn't have the chance to get informed citizen input at their public hearing, and citizens don't have the opportunity to appear at the planning board fully informed about the case and having discussions by with the applicant there. And then sometimes when this doesn't happen, there's uncertainty for neighbors about the proposal when no communication takes place. So what the proposal is to require that all zoning petitioners for a proposed rezoning within 500 feet of residential zoning, that there be an outreach requirement for them. It would allow for meetings or other forms of outreach. In some cases, petitioners have found it quite effective to go door to door with people, talk to them, have some kind of a mailer followed by some further outreach. So we didn't want to dictate exactly what form that needed to take, but we did want to require that the petitioner would have to submit a written description and a summary of whatever outreach efforts they took, and that would have to be submitted back 8 days prior to the planning board meeting. And that 8 days is important because that's the day that we are assembling our agenda book for the planning board, so that written description can go in the planning board book. It is seen by the public and the planning board, so that everyone knows before the hearing that it has taken place. And if it hasn't taken place, then there is an automatic continuance of the case to the next planning board hearing. So that's quite a strong incentive to have that outreach there. The other reason for the 8 days is that's the same deadline we give petitioners to turn back their revised site plans to us, so that those can go in the planning board agenda book as well. So those are the requirements in this proposed amendment. This went on May 11th to the planning board for public hearing. There was no opposition. There was discussion about some suggestions and questions that came up, but the planning board did recommend approval of this. And again, the General Government Committee discussed this proposal on March 21st and agreed to initiate this amendment.
Good. Any questions for Mr. Norby? Councilmember Adams.
Yes, Mr. Norby, how have we kind of polled developers or people like that to see how they feel about this?
We did reach out to some of the, I guess, the frequent flyers, if you will, of people who do zoning petitions.
Okay.
And while they feel like they do a pretty good job of doing the outreach, and I think they probably would prefer not to have any restrictions on that, they're really not the ones that we have problems with on that. And so I think what we're just trying to do is get more consistency of everyone who's trying a rezoning.
Okay.
Mr. Norby, if a situation where someone didn't submit, it was automatically continued to the next meeting, what if they didn't submit to that one? Is it continued again, or is that they just get one punishment?
Well, we didn't really address that in the ordinance, but I guess what we would do at that point is just go ahead and put it in the book, have it at the public hearing, and then the planning board would then at that point decide whether they want to continue it again or vote the case up or down. Mm-hmm. We might want to try it like it's written here if the council feels so fit to do so, and then if we do run into a problem with that second time, we could come back and
clear this. All right, Councilmember Bessie. Yes.
Mr. Norby, I noticed that this amendment appears under general use districts. Does this apply only to G requests, or does it also apply to S and L requests?
It would also apply to S districts.
And L?
Yes,
Thank
yes,
you.
all special, all rezonings, yes.
Councilmember Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor. I think you asked my question. I was curious about what would happen if the case if the petitioner had not met with the neighborhood before it went to the next council meeting. I think I've got a good answer on that. I just think the more that we can encourage neighbors and developers to meet and talk about issues during their communities, the better. I'm glad that the Conneaut community decided to sort of stay back. I actually asked that the previous case be continued because it's no secret I have a personal policy that I always meet with the residents who are in rezoning cases that are in residential communities. So I think the more we can do that, the better. Thank you.
Councilmember Montgomery.
That was simply my same statement in the sense that I think if we have a developer of any sort who's coming into a community and looking for rezoning that abuts residential neighborhoods, that it is incumbent upon them to be good stewards and be good community members to at least have conversations with that community about what their intended purposes of and how that will impact the neighborhood and the community. And so I think that having a specific requirement for all rezonings that touch and abut residential zonings, I think it is one that continues to make sure that we consider the thoughts and considerations of those who put us here on this council.
Councilmember McIntosh.
I want to go back to a question that Ms. Adams asked and talk about how this affects the development community. So can you walk us through the timeline of how much time does this add an additional burden from a time standpoint to somebody coming in to do a rezoning? They'll be informed how long before this needs to be in? How much time do they have to get this done?
Well, when they usually come in and have some discussions with us pre-application time. We strongly encourage developers to come in for what we call a Friday morning meeting, which is sort of an informal discussion with staff from different departments, and that's an early chance that we have to kind of talk to them about what are their requirements. Even if that doesn't happen on application day, we fully inform them, well, we've informed them now of the strong encouragement to have a neighborhood meeting. In that case, we would have in our application materials the requirement that they do that. That will give them at least 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks, perhaps a little bit more to set up those meetings. We would be able to give them our mailing list of the 500-foot radius if they choose to kind of reach out to all those folks there. So they should have plenty of time to be able to have such a meeting, and many developers do. Right. It's just a matter of how much they plan for it in their schedule.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right, very good. All right, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the council chamber who wishes to be heard on this proposed UDO amendment? Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Again, Councilmember Montgomery, it did come through your committee. If you're prepared for a motion, I would certainly entertain that.
Yes. I move for approval of 1, the statement of consistency as set forth on the agenda, and 2, UDO text amendment 279.
Second.
Motion second by Councilmember Adams. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anybody opposed, please indicate by voting no. That motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Now we have item Z7.
Item Z7, consideration of items regarding the issuance of $5,290,000 in 2/3 general obligation bonds, Series 2017A, $60,500,000 tax-exempt general obligation bonds, Series 2017B, and $4,500,000 taxable general obligation bonds, Series 2017C of the City of Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Councilmember, as you know, we've talked about this for quite a bit. Would you like for Ms. Saunders to make a brief presentation on this for the record? Everybody's okay? All right, well, let's just move right into it then. All right, we'll have the first bond order item. Go ahead.
Public hearing on bond order authorizing the issuance of $1,590,000 in public improvement bonds of the City of Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Need a motion to open this public hearing.
Second.
Motion and second to open the public hearing. All in favor of the motion to open the public hearing indicate by voting yes. Anybody opposed, vote no. All right, that's unanimous. We are in a public hearing regarding the issuance of $1.590 million of public improvement bonds. Is there anyone who, Council Chamber, who would like to be heard on this? Seeing no one, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Councilmember Clark, closed by, seconded by Councilmember Adams. All in favor of the motion to close, Councilmember McIntosh hit the button first. All in favor of the motion to close the public hearing, please indicate by voting yes. Anybody opposed, please vote no. That's unanimous. Thank you. The next bond order, please.
And we need to actually vote on the bond order.
Oh, I'm sorry. We do need we have a motion now to actually issue the bond order. I would entertain a motion. Councilmember Burke, is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember McIntosh, Councilmember Larson beat you to it. Councilmember Taylor moved it. All in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anybody opposed, please vote no. Thank you. That is unanimous. Now we go to the Parks and Recreation bonds.
Public hearing on bond order authorizing the issuance of $1,750,000 in park and recreation bonds of the city of Winston-Salem.
I would entertain a motion to open a public hearing on these bonds.
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Burke moves approval, seconded by James Taylor. Anyone is in favor of this motion to open a public hearing, please indicate by voting yes. Anybody opposed, vote no. That's unanimous. This is a public hearing on the issuance of $1.750 million of Parks and Recreation bonds by the city of Winston-Salem. Is there anyone in the council chamber who wishes to be heard on this? Seeing no one, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing. There's a second. Second by Councilmember Larson. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, please indicate by voting yes. Anybody opposed to closing? That's unanimous. Thank you. And now I entertain a motion to actually issue the bond order on the $1.750 Parks and Recreation bonds.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Clark, second by Councilmember Adams.
Actually, there's a lag and there's a lag time.
What?
You're going to have to wait till it comes up. It wasn't motioned.
Okay, well, hang on just a minute while the computer catches up with us.
It was Taylor and Adams. What do I need to do? Double click?
Horse race is microsecond rate.
Day trading.
Like day trading. Didn't make the cut.
We're up now. Okay, so we do have the motion by Councilmember Montgomery, seconded by Councilmember Bessie. All those in favor of this motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anybody opposed, please vote no. That's unanimous. Thank you. Now the street and sidewalks bonds.
Public hearing on bond order authorizing the issuance of $1,950,000 in street and sidewalk bonds of the city of Winston-Salem.
I entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
Got it.
Motion by Councilmember Taylor, seconded by Councilmember Montgomery. All those in favor of opening the public hearing, please indicate by voting yes. Opposed, vote no. That's unanimous. We are in a public hearing on the issuance of $1,950,000 of street and sidewalk bonds in the city of Winston-Salem. Is there anyone in the council chamber who wishes to be heard on these proposed bonds? Seeing no one, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
That's gone. What motion's gone? We need another motion. We're going to have another motion.
We have another motion, please, to close the public hearing.
This one?
You're on it right now. Just go ahead and click the record button.
Motion by Councilmember Clark, seconded by Councilmember McIntosh. All those in favor of closing the public hearing indicate by voting yes. Anybody opposed, vote no. That's unanimous. Thank you. Now we need a motion on the actual bond order.
So moved.
I didn't call for a vote on it, but
Well, we voted anyway.
We just voted.
You know what you tell us.
All right.
You're so insensitive.
Faster than the system can keep up.
Yeah, they're moving it to the next item. Motioning on that. It's getting, it's motioning on the current item.
We were trained very
Yeah.
Was that the vote on that particular item?
I gotta.
All right, we now need to vote on the resolution of the city council. If you'd read that item.
Okay. Let me go back to this. Resolution of the City Council of the City of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, providing for the issuance of $5,290,000 two-thirds general obligation bonds, Series 2017A, $60,500,000 tax-exempt general obligation bonds, Series 2017B, and $4,500,000 taxable general obligation bonds, Series 2017C of the City of Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
I recognize Councilmember Montgomery as chair of the Community Development, Housing, and General Government Committee, who I believe, no, I beg your pardon, Councilmember Adams, excuse me.
Move for approval of the resolution.
And a second. Second. Councilmember Clark, very good. All those in favor of approving this resolution indicate by voting yes. Anybody opposed, please indicate by voting no.
I didn't get a screen. Yeah, you got a faster computer.
All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you. Item Z8.
Item Z8, resolution regarding the eligibility of the following properties for the National Register of Historic Places: R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company Buildings 2-1 and 2-2, 951 Reynolds Boulevard, located in the North Ward, recommended by the Community Development, Housing, and General Government Committee.
Ms. McCullough, if you want to give us a brief presentation regarding these two structures, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am here this evening to go over the National Register nomination review to see that the nomination meets the criteria that the National Park Service presents for this to be listed on the National Register of Historic Places. I'm sorry, it's been a long day. Tonight, we are going to be considering the R.J.R. Reynolds Tobacco Company Buildings 2A and 2-2, which is 2-1 and 2-2, which is at 951 Reynolds Boulevard, Winston-Salem. This is at Whitaker Park. Most people know it as Whitaker Park. Historically, it was called Tire Town because of the Haynes Rubber Company across the street. 2-1 is from the 1937, and 2-2 is from 1955. Oops. I'm batting 1,000 tonight. Let's go. Here we go. Just to kind of show you an aerial view of the property, surrounded in red are the two buildings that will be listed for the National Register. They're the older portions of Whitaker Park. This is just those up close. There are a couple smaller buildings, as you can see to the right of your screen. Those would be considered non-contributing to the National Register nomination. On May 3rd, 2017, the Historic Resource Commission considered this nomination, and they found that it did meet the criteria, which is special significance. And in this case, it's one of Winston-Salem's best, most intact examples of mid-20th century tobacco leaf houses. And for that architectural, this is really glamorous, fire-resistant industrial design. But it also continues the legacy of Reynolds and showing that this huge giant corporation continued to grow, expand, and embrace our community even out further than downtown to the north in the North Ward. And it meets the other criteria for integrity, and that would be mostly physical integrity, but the integrity of the building. And they agreed unanimously that it does meet these two criteria. Just a couple more slides with photographs if you'd like to see them. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the site and very excited about the site being broken up and redeveloping. So, any questions?
Any questions, Ms. McCullough? Great. Thank you very much, Ms. McCullough. This did come through the Community Development, Housing, and General Government Committee. If the chairman is prepared for a motion, I would certainly entertain it.
Move approval. Second.
Motion and second to approve this eligibility. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anybody opposed, please indicate by voting no. That's unanimous. Thank you, Council. Now, item Z9.
Item Z9, Mayor Pro Tempore Burke's recommendation for appointment to the Piedmont Triad Airport Commission. Mayor Alan Joines' appointment, term expiring June 2020.
I'm trying to touch my mouth.
You got it.
So
Councilmember Burke moves approval. Is there a second? Second. Officially, Councilmember Taylor and Councilmember Larson got there first. All in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. Any opposed, vote no.
Ma'am, I just
Yes.
make a statement.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
As you know, in the past, we had a citizen to sit on, and I felt that we need to have a person on the council to take care of our interests. And I was very pleased to nominate the mayor. We visited several times over there, and we don't know how much we will gain from where we're located, but his charge will be to make sure if there's any economic impact that can be made in this city, we want it to happen, and I thank you for agreeing, sir.
Thank you, Councilmember Burke.
Point of order.
Councilmember Clark?
I don't think I voted.
All right. So we are one missing there.
I think I'm the one missing.
Okay.
Can we tell?
Let's see.
Y'all were up and down for a while.
Yeah. No, Councilmember Burke is missing.
Oh.
Councilmember Burke would obviously vote.
You would vote in favor, right?
Yeah, she got you down.
I've got you.
Okay, you're good. All right, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Item 10.
Item Z10, Mayor joins recommendations for appointments and reappointments to boards and commissions. MWBE Advisory Committee, Kevin Byers, reappointment, term expiring April 2020.
Is there a motion? Councilmember McIntosh moves his approval. Councilmember Larson seconds. All those in favor, please indicate by voting yes. Anybody opposed, please vote no. That's unanimous. Thank you. Next item.
Creative Corridors Design Review Committee, Stephen Hairston appointment, term expiring July 2018. Hannah Caron appointment, term expiring July 2020. James Hoots appointment, term expiring September 2020. Gregory Arrett appointment, term expiring July 2018. James Wesley Shaw, Sr., reappointment, term expiring July 2020. Catherine Baker, reappointment, term expiring July 2020. William Marion, reappointment, term expiring July 2020. And Jimmy L. Norwood, Jr., reappointment, term expiring July 2020.
Entertain a motion. Councilmember Taylor moves approval, seconded by Councilmember Larson. All those in favor of this motion, please indicate by voting yes. And any opposed, vote. It's unanimous. Thank you. Council members, we do have a need for a closed session. We have another. Oh, excuse me, we've got the
minutes.
Z11, please.
Item Z11, approval of summary of minutes from May 1st, 2017.
May I have a motion on the approval of the minutes?
So moved.
Motion by Councilmember Clark, second by Councilmember Larson. All those in favor of approving the summary of minutes, please indicate by voting yes. Any opposed, please vote no. Thank you. That's unanimous. Now, we do have a need for a brief closed session regarding an economic development item. In that regard, I would recognize Councilmember Taylor for a motion.
Mayor, members of the council, I move that the city council go into closed session pursuant to a North Carolina General Statute 143-318, 11A4, to discuss the location or expansion of an industry and or business within the city of Winston-Salem.
Second.
Second.
Councilmember Adams, all in favor of going to closed session, please indicate by voting yes. Anybody opposed, indicate by voting no. Unanimous to go to brief closed session. Is there a motion to end the closed session?
So moved. Move.
Do I have to wait on?
Hey, you know that the bond.
Let's just go.
Someone would second that motion, please?
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Adams, second by Councilmember Bessie. All in favor of the motion to end the closed session, please indicate by voting yes. no, nobody wants to vote no. That's okay. We'll put you in as a yes.
I think we ought to keep going. I like it. They were the food was.
That's unanimous. And is there a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember McIntosh. I'm sorry, Montgomery. Beg your pardon.
I get it. Just a quick comment. First and foremost, I'd like to say thank you to colleagues here on council.
Thank you.
For your calls and well wishes in reference to the loss of my grandfather. Funeral service will be tomorrow, and so I will not be with you all tomorrow in terms of the dialogue and conversation around the budget. But I have conveyed my comments to the city manager, and will do so in writing to the chair of finance committee in reference to the budget process moving forward. But again, I say thank you all for your consideration in this time.
Thank you, and we certainly be with you tomorrow at the service with our thoughts and prayers. Thank you. If we're good, I would now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And motion by Councilmember Taylor, second by Councilmember Larson. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please indicate by voting yes. Anybody opposed can vote no. But we're not going to count.
Go ahead, vote no. Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
And we're unanimously adjourned. Thank you very much.